is round 2 of this podcast. This is not the first conversation we've had. You're a better man than I, because and it's the only time you will notice we have a different system than we did when you recorded the last time. Yeah.
I love it.
We've learned from our mistakes, because this poor guy here, you're the only one who has ever had a corrupted file for a podcast, for audio. Yeah. So we're sitting here recording again, re-recording what should have been just one podcast.
I am happy to do it. And the reason I'm happy to do it is Harrison sent me the file. He's like, man, it just felt like the conversation was so good. I think we can, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
And I listened to it and I'm like, no, it's not going to be fun. There is this thing that I learned when I worked at Apple, and we used to say excellence is the price of admission. And sometimes that means doing it again.
Yeah.
And you guys, everything you do is excellent. And I'm like, you don't want this. I don't want this. So don't try to make my feelings, like, don't try to accommodate me. Let's just start over. So I was very supportive of let's do it again.
Well, I appreciate it. It's less accommodating. I just hate wasting people's time.
Yeah.
Because I hate when my time's wasted. Because you're a busy guy too. It's like, you've got a lot going on. You've got a family, you've got business going on. You're probably traveling. Do you travel much?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you travel. So especially travel, that just eats away at time like nothing else. And so, I've got a lot going on. So it's like, when something just wastes my time, it's just like drives me nuts. So I feel
happy to be here.
Waste your time a little bit, but
we're
happy to have you again.
We're good.
Yeah, this is delightful.
We got to warm up.
Boy did we. boy did we. I guess the original conversation can help accelerate this conversation a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can get into all kinds of other stuff. You just alluded to it. You were at Apple,
mm-hmm.
and then you go from Apple and you meet this guy Donald Miller, and you go into this new world that he's creating that's now known as StoryBrand.
Yeah.
Can you take us to the early days of StoryBrand? Because you were at
employee
the ground
one.
floor, employee one.
Yeah.
And so what was that like? What were you originally hired to do?
So I was working at Apple, but on the side, I was managing a musician and another author, and loved my time at Apple, and yet kind of saw long term, I just didn't think me working in a retail space where you're working nights and weekends and working all the times when my friends aren't.
Yeah.
That wasn't that fun.
Believe it. Yeah.
And so, but I loved kind of working alongside somebody and helping them make their dreams, come to life, execute on the vision, all that. I have different language for it now than I did back then. I was just like, great. You want to do this? Let's go for it. And so got connected with Don. And at the time, he's writing books, he's speaking. And so really my job was trying to free him up to spend as much time writing and speaking and focusing on those kinds of things. And then let me handle everything else. Let me handle the, logistics, all the small details and things. And I love that. I absolutely loved it. So that went from just me and Don to, then we had a year later, another full-time employee, and we were running a blog that we were posting on 5-6 days a week and starting to grow that. And not too long after, we started this whole StoryBrand venture, which really came from so Don was writing books, but also we had this life planning conference.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to figure out, how do we get more and more people showing up to our life planning conference? And Don was just obsessed with the idea of story and saw how impactful story is and can be for just capturing people's attention. So he's like, what if we used story principles and applied it to marketing? What if you actually invited people into a story with the words that you use on your website or, in a video?
Yeah.
What would that do to capture people's attention and then therefore the results that you have in your business? And our conferences started selling out.
Mm.
And we're like, wow, we had 700 people a couple years ago. We have 2,400 this time.
Oh.
Like, what Well, that's a pretty big shift.
Yeah.
So we couldn't really attribute much of the growth to anything but just really, well, there's a lot of things. We were improving the conference and that, but I would say the driving factor was how we communicated it. So what was working for us, we started to test out with other business leaders, and they were starting to find success. And so what we were doing in a boardroom with 10 executives or 15 people, we started to just scale after seeing more and more results that people were seeing in their businesses as we were helping them apply story concepts to their marketing.
And storytelling's so interesting. I feel like it's this elusive thing out there to a lot of people. But I feel like I've realized this in the past few years, that storytelling, one's a skill, and it's oftentimes formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think back to storytelling, especially growing up, I'd go to a place up in Montana, and there were these guys up there, and they were all really well accomplished. And they were very well traveled, and traveled in a very adventurous sense. Like one of them had done 6 of the 7 summits, for example, and both poles and just crazy stuff. And we'd sit down around the fire as kids, and we would just tell us a story. And we would just be captivated by these stories. And now I know a lot of them were heavily embellished and some of them completely made up, but we had no idea that we couldn't get enough of this stuff. And I had always thought, again, it was just like, you're either good at it or you're not. But then I started to learn, no, it's a skill. And then I started to think back on how things were structured. It's like, yeah, there's a common structure there. And then if you can figure out the common structure, you can start to apply that skill, and you can practice, and then you can tell a better story. And then if you tell a better story, you can lead more effectively. You can sell more. You can get more people into your world because, I don't know, maybe, I guess, marketing fundamentally is storytelling. All you are selling a story on how this product or service can make your life, your company better. That's it fundamentally. Yeah. So it's all this to say, when I read StoryBrand, that started to connect a lot of dots for me as far as, wow, you can really follow this formula and apply it to most storytelling ever. And then not only that, but you can go take it and you can apply it to your business to make your business more successful. Sign me up. This is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, it put into language what a lot of people were doing intuitively.
Yes.
So some of the early conversations that we were having were with billion-dollar brands. I remember the Chick-fil-A executives sitting down in our office asking us what we thought about the cow campaign. And I'm like, I think you guys are doing just fine.
It worked out for them. Yeah.
But
I think it worked out for them.
First of all, what I love about that is just their desire and appetite to learn. They just wanted to keep getting better. So I love that they even wanted the meeting. But what they've been doing intuitively for years, Don had found a way to put into a framework. And one of the big paradigm shifts that every business leader, every marketing department can apply is this idea of your company is not the hero. Like, you are the guide and your customer is the hero. So in any movie, the formula, you've got a character, they've got a problem. Well, guess what happens in most movies? They meet a guide, right? So Luke Skywalker meets Yoda, right? And so on so many websites, so many company websites, you go and it's just talking about how incredible this company is, the awards that they've won.
Yeah.
And that's just not going to engage anybody or get anybody too excited. What the business leader or your customer is waking up thinking about is the challenges that they are up against, and they are looking for somebody to help them solve their problem. So that was one of the big paradigm shifts. And if you only take one paradigm shift out of anything that you learned from that framework, I think that's the one. Like, think about your customer. They are the hero. You are trying to come alongside them and help them win the day. And, there's a time and a place for your own experience and accolades and whatnot, but that's just boosting your authority to be able to help them solve their problem. But the focus really is on them.
Well, and I think this is where it really applies to the dirt world too. I think a lot of the dirt world's problems or challenges right now, the antidote to a lot of the challenges is storytelling. And it sounds a little crazy. It's like, oh, really? That's it? Storytelling? And no, that's not it. But I think the industry has really, I call it a lot of people say it's a perception problem. I think it's a non-existent perception problem. One, people just don't even recognize it exists. They don't even know the dirt world is there. And then two, I think not even externally selling the industry and telling that story of the industry, but internally. I think a lot of people that work in the industry today, in the dirt world today, have forgotten why they do what they do, because that story hasn't been told. It's always been about the projects, but the customer in most infrastructure is the user, is the community. They're really the guide in the sense for the community. They're really serving the community, elevating the community. And maybe no one will ever know that they helped build that road. That road gets 100,000 people home every single night, or to work every single day, or to school, or old people to the hospital, whatever it is. Without that road, the community would crumble. It's not about you. You helped these people along, whether they know or not. And I just think the more we can tell that story and remind people, those that are working hard, because it's a hard world. It's hard days, hard weeks, hard months. It's right now we're coming out of winter. It's cold. It's miserable. And if you lose sense of the importance of that story, that purpose, it just becomes meaningless. And so I see storytelling as a key factor in really helping the dirt world go to where it needs to be, is educating society, but first and foremost, starting with the individuals within the industry. And then that's how we've tried to position BuildWit. We're the guide. We are by no means the hero. By no means the hero. And if we ever think we're the hero, we better slap ourselves.
Lost it.
Yeah. We better get out of that real quick, or else there's just no place for us.
Well, I think it's the dirt world, but I would imagine there are people in every single industry that need to be reminded why they do what they do.
Everybody. Yes.
Because so much of the work that we do each and every day, you're never going to get the credit or the recognition for.
No.
But in this culture that kind of says success is only if you are getting all of that, attention and recognition for that work, it puts us in this really weird headspace. But I think that the healthiest version of ourselves is when we're able to look at the work that we do and see it a part of a larger whole. Like we are a part of the larger story. We're helping build that road that helps the 100,000 people.
Yeah.
And I think when we are in our healthy headspace, that is what can drive us. But it's a challenge for me and for everybody on some days to wake up and kind of have that perspective, because it's very easy to get kind of wrapped up in your own world.
I struggle with it all the time. And going to the recognition thing, I think we are bombarded by that recognition side of the world, and we think that's how it should be. But I feel like the most successful people I've ever met, and I think we're going to get to this down the road too, they put the recognition elsewhere. Even if it comes their way, no, this isn't my deal. This is thanks to all of these individuals. I feel like the most successful people, they go in the opposite direction of human nature in a lot of ways. I think naturally we want the recognition. We want to feel special. We want it desperately, but those that then grab it, deflect it, and go put it upon others are the ones that are by far the most successful. By far the most successful. In whatever category, whether it be business or sports or anybody, I feel like you can't really think of a great leader or somebody well distinguished that's just taken all the credit for themselves.
Yeah, one of my favorite leaders, going back to spending time at Apple, when I started, Steve Jobs was the CEO, and then actually, he passed away. Tim Cook is who ended up being the CEO for the last year that I was there. And, leaders cast a shadow. I mean, what they do is what is modeled by the other people on the team. They kind of set a standard. And I remember at the release of the Apple Watch, so Tim Cook, he does this big announcement, but then afterwards he's being interviewed on national television. And David Muir asks him, is this the moment for you, the moment of your career at Apple? And if I'm Tim Cook in that moment, the way that I answer that question, I'm probably using it as an opportunity to kind of let people know what I've been doing for the last 20 years behind the scenes to be ready for this, how I'm going to take this company to the next era, whatever. It'd be very easy to kind of take the bait and make it about him. But what I love is the response. He didn't do any of that. So is this the moment for you, the moment of your career at Apple? He says, well, it's a moment for Apple. I don't really think about myself that much. And I feel like that moment, he recognizes, first of all, that he didn't do that by himself, right? To create an Apple Watch takes hundreds, if not thousands of employees just to pull that off. So I love that he just sets the tone, the example as a leader to try not to take the credit for himself, to deflect that credit to his team. But also, I just think the humility that he operates from in that he doesn't need to let everybody know why he's in the position that he's in. And he doesn't have to make it about him. And that to me, I just feel like is such a great example for a leader at the very top, at the highest possible level.
If you're at the highest possible level, you don't really need to talk about it because it's obvious. Like,
we know.
Yeah, everybody should know. Like if you have to, that's why a lot of companies are doing this nowadays. They're calling themselves like disruptive or something like that. It's like, that's saying I'm really attractive on my online dating profile. It's like, no, I'm not the one that makes that distinction. I don't get to say that. Like, no. I have to go disrupt. If that's what I'm here to do, I have to go disrupt. And then other people are supposed to say that because they're supposed to know that I'm disrupting, or they're supposed to know I'm athletic or good looking or whatever it is. I can't say that about myself. And so I think that's also part of it is when you're doing what you're supposed to do, when you're a great leader or great at whatever you're doing, people know. You don't have to talk about it.
Just walk the talk. That's it. You don't have, and I even love too hearing, I spend a lot of time, so we have this podcast called How Leaders Lead. So I spend a lot of time listening to some of the top CEOs in the world talk about how they lead. And one thing that I just see time and time again is they don't spend a whole lot of time trying to make a big stand on issues. They just do the work. And I respect the heck out of that because you don't have to go tell everybody, here's what we're doing, come look at us. It's like, we're just going to do it. And then you can talk about it later if you want to, but they're not making a big thing about it.
But again, you have to fight that human nature like almost all the time. I want to talk about it all the time. Then I realize, I don't need to talk about it. This is silly. And then sometimes it can work against you to talk about it because it's like, we're going to attract the wrong, there's this one thing we're about to finish. And my first thought was, we need to make a splash about this. I want people to know that we did this. I want press releases. I want full court, whatever we can do to get the word out about this because this is a big deal. And then, a few weeks went by and I started to think, does it change anything for us if that's out there? Why do I want this out there? Does it change anything about our business? Does it really help our business? No, not really. I think it would do the opposite, actually. I think it would attract some of the attention we don't want right now. We don't really want people looking at us like that. And those that would notice it are the ones that we're never going to do business with. We don't want anything to do with. So I want this because of my ego. I want to feel special. I actually want to shout, look at me. Yeah. I am successful. I know what I'm doing. And as soon as I realized that, I'm like, you idiot. Like, thank goodness I didn't do it. And we're not going to do it. I have no interest in it anymore. But I had to pull myself back. And it's something I've worked really hard on. And I've worked for years to do this one thing. I've never worked harder at something, which is why I want the recognition. But then it's like, that's not the point.
and it's not going away.
No.
So that wrestling that you experienced in that one decision, you're going to have that for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And you are the only one who can be self-aware enough to know the intent behind why you're trying to do the thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember Don used to always say is insecure people talk about themselves and secure people talk about others. Mm-hmm. So if you've ever been to, a networking event, just as an example, it's like, are you just walking around trying to impress people?
Yeah.
Or do you have just enough confidence in yourself that you can ask the other person about their story?
Sure.
Because the moments that I really try to be impressive, I've just learned that those are the times actually that I'm feeling really insecure and I'm trying to make it all about me. And those are usually the conversations and the moments that I look back on with regret.
Yeah. Yeah. And that takes me back to Dale Carnegie, who we have a great relationship with as well. It's an amazing organization. And one of the simplest principles that Dale Carnegie originally taught was you make a lot more friends and you make a lot more progress in conversations becoming interested in others than trying to make other people interested in you. And it's such a simple concept, but even today it's like, I catch myself doing that all the time. I'm trying to make you interested in me. It's like, no, shut up. Just become interested in you. Like, what do you have going on? And then he has these funny stories because it's like, he illustrates the point by it'll be a 30-minute conversation and it's only them talking to him and he's just asking a few questions here or there. And then they'll say, he's the nicest guy in the world. Like he's one of the best. He's one of the best people I've ever talked to. But he didn't say anything about himself just because he let them talk for 30 minutes. They feel valued and heard, and that's all they need to say. Yeah, this guy's fantastic, which is funny. You spent a substantial time with Donald Miller with StoryBrand. How long were you there?
Almost 10 years. I was like 3 months short of 10 years.
Crazy.
It's wild.
And you really built it from just one individual to then it's a pretty big deal now.
We were like doing $250,000 in revenue and grew it to like a $16.5 million business.
Amazing.
And I only say that as it's such a big difference. Those two companies are very different.
Yeah.
Me and Don, right at the beginning, that is a very different operation than you've got 30 team members. And now, you and I have talked about just the operation of a business and all that can be learned.
Sure.
That is, you got to keep evolving. And we, for 10 years, just kept evolving and kind of learning the next right thing as a leader for where our business was at. So I learned, I couldn't have gone to school and had a better education. I mean, I learned pretty much everything that I know about business leading from just doing it.
Yeah.
And like such a gift.
And to that point, I'm young and I'm trying to learn business and leading and I'm impatient. And I try to, you just try to consume as much information as you can. I read every day. I listen to podcasts, talk to people like you, this and that. I try to do it all. But I've also had to, I think I've begun to swallow this pill. I don't think I've choked it down quite yet, but some of it just takes time.
Yeah.
And some of it does take experience. I think when you're really young, I'm still young, I'm 29, but when you're really young, you're like, these experienced people don't know. I know what's going on here. And then you start to gain that real world experience and take these leadership principles, but actually apply them and see them play out. And yeah, I think you can accelerate it to an extent, but I also think it just takes time to figure out and maybe not even figure out, but to start to figure out. And I feel like I'm just on the cusp of that. Like, okay, I've just had enough time to start seeing that. No, I actually didn't know what the heck what I was doing. And so that 10-year period, it really is like the only way to do it. There's no shortcut to it.
So now I'm running a nonprofit for David Novak, and David was the CEO of Yum Brands, so KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and everything that you're describing. It's like I felt like I knew some stuff.
Yeah.
Like I learned a lot, running this business. But when I spend time talking to David, who, while he was CEO, he had 1.5 million employees. It's like there is nothing that I can ever bring him that he hasn't experienced a million times.
Yeah.
And it's because he's 71 years old. And he's also been in these high pressure leadership positions for decades. And so I'm so grateful for that 10 years. But even just in the 2 years spending time getting to learn from him, just feels like almost like a hockey stick in terms of my growth and my learning. But you get to see how all the learning that you've experienced, imagine where you'll be 40 years from now, right? But I think the most important thing is to have an appetite to learn and want to have your antenna up for those little bits of wisdom that you can be pulling from a podcast, from a book, and then you go and try and apply it.
Yeah.
One of the big things that David talks about is there's a difference between avid learning and active learning. Avid learners just learn. Active learners actually try to take what they learn and put it into practice. And the second is harder, But if you are constantly learning and then trying to apply it, I just think you do that times a million and, you're going to be in a really good spot. I don't know where you'll be, but I think you're going to be in a better spot.
You'll be in a better spot no matter where it is. Yeah, it's that active piece is so important. But that's the piece that trips people up in a lot of ways. Because learning, just learning, I think I don't know if it's simpler, but it's, I would say safer. There's not a lot of risk in it. There's not a lot of challenge in it in a way. Whereas taking something and applying it, and especially if you're applying it for the first time, there's a high likelihood in which it doesn't work. When it doesn't work, there's consequences. And then you have to sort those consequences out. And maybe you feel stupid or whatever it is, it hurts your ego or you hurt other people or whatever it is. Like I think there's a greater cost to it, but there's also a far greater benefit to it as well. But I feel like that's what trips people up is that risk, that unknown. Hey, okay, I know this, quote unquote, I know this, but if I go apply it, if I go try to really do it, it might not work. And I don't know if I will. And I don't blame them because oftentimes it's not very fun. But I feel like that's really that's it right there. That's the secret. And I think so many people I feel like a lot of people have met really smart people that know a lot of stuff, but at the same time are not very smart because they haven't done a lot of stuff. They have so much information, but so little life experience. But all that information almost fools them into thinking they have all of the life experience. But everybody from the outside can see, no, you're missing the most important part. And that is the doing piece of it. And I'm grateful to be in a position where I do get to do like you. I mean, you're doing every day, which is just, it's not always fun, but it's really exciting, I guess is the word I'd say.
So here's an example of the challenge from going from an avid learner to active. So we have an episode this week coming out with Deion Sanders. So Deion has, of course, made massive waves over at Colorado.
Yeah, he's done well for himself. Yeah.
And so one of the things we talked about was, so he goes into the first press conference with his team, and he just completely shocks the system. Just lets everybody know there's a new sheriff in town. And so we like to try to get into the minds of leaders. How did you prepare for that? What were you trying to say? And so he talked about how he's a fisherman. And so he says that every year in all of his ponds, they'll shock the water and the fish come up to the surface and they get to take accountability of what is here to make sure that there's a nice mixture of the different kinds of fish for the survival of, the pond and everything.
Sure.
And so he kind of equates that to in leadership, sometimes you got to shock the system. But it's not just shocking to shock. It's actually shocking to take accountability, to see what you're working with, and then to act. So he sets this crazy high standard. He's like, this is what we're going to do. This is what the culture is going to be. That's the easy lesson to learn. The hard lesson is, how do you hold people accountable to that standard now that you've set it?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I hear that lesson from Dion and I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Shock the system, hold people accountable. Like, got it. But like, what happens when you're looking at the numbers? Let's just say that it's marketing, right? Like, and the numbers in marketing are not what they need to be. Yeah. And you're the leader. Are you picking up the phone to talk to the person who's leading marketing to dig into that problem and find out what's going on? Because it's a lot easier to not, but you have to make the phone call, right? Like you have to hold people accountable. So that's one of those easier said than done kind of lessons, but I'm trying to just lean into that, have the hard conversation, ask the question, and but it's easier said than done.
Totally easier said than done. And especially even if, I feel like there sometimes needs to be consequences for actions. Hey, if this is going to happen again, here's going to be the consequence. And I think I've been thinking through this too, like an instance is maybe two younger guys on the team. They haven't been organized in booking their travel. And so they wait far longer than they should. And then it ends up being twice as expensive for no reason, no additional value for twice the expense. And it's been driving me nuts, driving Jessica nuts, who helps put the travel together. But I recognized, well, this is our fault. We haven't really defined the parameters here, and we haven't said it needs to be done within this time frame or else this happens. So then now there's a due date to it. And if it's not done by the due date, the consequence is you don't go on the trip. But for me, that's not easy to say because we don't have a lot of redundancies. If one of these guys didn't go on the trip, I'd be screwed. But I didn't. I said that fully knowing that this might screw me in the future, and it would be easier for me. Well, just don't worry about it. I haven't had to enforce it yet. There might be a day where I do have to enforce it. And I don't think that's going to be a fun day for anybody. But I now see the value in that because all you really need is that one time to hammer that lesson home. And then once you got the lesson hammered home, you don't really have to talk about it again. But it's so much easier to just, you know what? Just don't worry about it. And then it makes it, and then I don't have to suffer along with it. And it just makes it simpler. But that is absolutely the right thing.
I heard some friends of mine have this restaurant in Seattle, and they were talking about culture. And they said, your core values are only your core values if they cost you something. So you make a claim like that. Hey, if this doesn't happen, here's what we're going to do, which is, you could call that out in a value of the company. It's like, we're going to be good stewards of our finances or whatever, right? It's like, okay, well, your core values are only your core values if they cost you something. Are you willing to take on more work for the trip when you just say, that's what we said.
Yeah.
That was the expectation, and we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And you're going to feel some pain. Well, but you got to decide if that's worth it.
Or even, in the Deion Sanders example, it's like, people talking about you or people don't like you or this and that. And going back to our earlier conversation, you have to know who you are, because if you don't know who you are and you do that, it's going to eat you because now people are, well, they're not going to like me. Then in human nature, you want to be liked, you want to blend in, you want to be part of the tribe, but you have to go against that and you have to acknowledge, maybe I'm not going to be liked. Maybe now, short term, maybe long term, but this is what's best for the overall organization. This is what's best for these individuals, whether they see that or not. And those that hold that line are so valuable in society. And it's only becoming more rare, which then makes it even more valuable if you can learn that skill on how to hold that line, because a lot of people aren't doing it nowadays, including myself in the past, especially. I'm trying to figure this out like as we speak, this is one of the things that I'm like, it's in my petri dish right now. I'm kind of in my beakers and on my little lab. I'm playing with it right now, and it's like, oh wow, it's exciting because I know this is a really important lesson to learn, but at the same time, it kind of sucks because it's like there's going to be a cost somewhere.
What I want to do a better job of is documenting those lessons for myself. Because if I spend a lot of time thinking about all that I have learned over the last 10 years on the leadership front, I mean, I could write an entire book on that. But sometimes we just go through our day-to-day and we kind of forget all that it is that we are experimenting with in our petri dish.
Sure.
And I don't know what that process is, but how amazing would that be at the end of a year or whatever time frame to be able to look back and be like, here's what happened. Here's a lesson. Here's how I was learning it. Here's kind of what the fits and false starts looked like. And just to be able to see your own leadership journey. I don't know, even talking about this, it makes me want to figure out how to really do that.
About 3 years ago, I developed the habit of writing every day. I've written every day for the past. Once I develop a habit, I stick with it. I don't waver. Non-negotiable every single day. So I write 1 page a day. I have a notebook. It's not, I don't put time on it. I don't put topics on it. And it's not a huge page. I mean, it might take me 5 to 10 minutes, but it's a forced period of reflection daily. And I write down, hey, I had a great conversation today, great podcast, or I didn't do this very well, or this is what I ate. It's just across the board. But I've been trying to take inventory of every day deliberately. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I think even if I don't necessarily reflect upon it, it's forced reflection on every day now on how did my conversations go? What did I do well? What didn't I do well? Where was I today? What did I do? Because even if I don't read it, that just small moment of reflection, I think then I was listening. It was a video. I think it was John Donner. He's I think a jiu-jitsu guy, and he was talking about how most people, their lives are just linear. It's just one day, and then they just go to the next day, and it's just days stacked in front of each other with there's no reflection, there's no iteration. Very rarely is there like deliberate iteration, so that the days can't build upon each other. They just continue in front of one. And so it's just a linear progression over the course of a whole lifetime. And as he said that, I started to look around, I'm like, man, that is completely true. But he said, even if you can just, take a little bit out of every day and then stack it on top of the next day, now you can start to create that real, true growth. That's the real good stuff. And it's like, man, that's it. Like, that's it in a nutshell. I think you don't want to live linearly. You want to stack those lessons and reflect. And I have all thoughts. So many thoughts on the subject.
What time do you do it?
In the evening, typically. But in the evening, it'll be. I'll reflect through what did I do just today. So I'll write the date at the top, where I am in the world, location, and then I just write, and it's just whatever's on my mind. No rhyme or reason to any of it.
I like that. I think it doesn't have to be this high-tech answer. It's like, it's just sit and write it down for a page, 5-10 minutes.
Just a page. Yeah, all it takes just real low. And I met this one guy and when I was in college, and he had like the most complicated system for every one of his days, and it's like maybe that works for you, but I don't think that's all that reason. I mean, it was like a wildly complicated system. He had developed like his own book and all these lines and this section and this section, this section, this section. I'm looking at it, I'm like, how do you keep up with just this? Like how what? And so for me, I'm a much simpler mind. So if it's simple, if it's easy to do, easy to comprehend, I'm going to do it. That's at least what's worked for me.
There's a book that I just started reading about it's tiny habits, not atomic habits. It's called Tiny Habits. But this guy's developing habit formation, but essentially you're just trying to make it as easy on yourself as possible. So something like do 2 push-ups a day. Like in your mind, you think, oh, what's the smallest possible increment that you write 5 words on a page? And that it's almost like the getting going. That's the hardest part. I know that's it for me, but I'm sure there's days when it's hard to sit down and start, but then after you start, you just you're there and get rolling. Does that feel true?
All the time. I'm very rarely, I sit down like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to write about. Like, no. That's not how it works. It's, you just have to do it. And I don't stop until I finish the page. That's the rule. That's the only rule. Just fill up a page. And so it's just simple. But yeah, the act of just having to do it, I think has been really valuable. I do the same thing for reading, 10 pages a day. That's the system. I don't have a number of books. I don't have a book goal for the year. 10 pages a day, 365 days a year. Simple. And I know I have to do it today. And so if you and me would be going to dinner after this and maybe, late evening, I would have done it this morning. I would have planned ahead. I would have done it this morning. But usually I do that in the evening too. Or if I'm flying, I'll do it on the plane. When I sit down on the plane, I'll get my 10 pages out of the way. So that in the evening, I'm like, yeah, got my 10 pages
you're
out
going
of
to
the way.
do it.
But it's non-negotiable. I always do it.
I love that.
Yeah. It's just like
It's
a silly
habits.
little system. Habits.
But those are those, you're talking about those 10 pages a day, that one written page a day. I think that too, 10 years from now, that's that 1% better every day. You're actually trying to take ownership of the things that you are learning and try to be intentional about that growth. And that's something that you value. And I love that you're not just taking that idea, but you're really living it out. And there's a book in there.
Maybe.
Matthew McConaughey did it.
His book was well
That's
done.
what he says. It's just journal entries for years and years.
His book was well done. Yeah. I'll do something with it one day, but I gotta, to the earlier point too, I gotta go do something before I think I write a book and tell a story. How did you meet David Novak?
So I wrote a book. I had a dream about 7 years ago. I wanted to write a book. No other reason aside from having worked with Don for as long as I did. I got to see power, like the impact that books can have in people's lives. Like his books had impacted mine. And through Don, I met a lot of other authors and just got to see more and more of that. And so I remember just thinking, oh, that would be so fun. And then I have that idea. And then I think, okay, well, what would I write a book about? And just kind of started to have my antenna up for what it is that I was really passionate about. What did I have the authority to write on at the age that I was at? Because I'm not over here trying to say that I'm this, early 30s expert on anything.
Yeah.
That's,
But for my course,
what can I offer up, to the world in that kind of sense? So I write this book, and as I was getting closer to releasing the book, I just realized if I want to do that well, do that meaning like launch a book, I just knew that the time that would take was just not going to marry well with me trying to run this company to 100% like I had been for years, and just made this decision to walk away from one dream to chase a new one. And I ended up stepping into that, but also realized I'd been in the background at StoryBrand for my entire career. Like people didn't know who I was. So thinking about, okay, how can I make money? How can I provide for my family? I thought, okay, well, what would bring me joy if I could start completely over? What would really bring me joy on a profession side of things? And so I was like, I want to write books. I want to do my own podcast, but I'd actually love to help somebody else on a podcast. And that could be one way that I could, make a little bit of money. And, but I wanted it to be the right fit.
Yeah.
Something that really energized me. And I knew David through a friend. I didn't know him, but I knew of David through a friend. And so I ended up getting in front of David and essentially just said, I love what you're doing with this podcast, and I think I can help. And so long story short, that was the beginning of how we started working together. It was me coming alongside him to help on his podcast.
Did he have anything at the time, or did you essentially build the infrastructure out from the beginning?
He was 57 episodes in.
Okay.
So he had some incredible guests, and but I then came in with some structure to it, and I think have been able to roll that out over the last, I think we're on episode like 177 now.
Wow.
So over the last couple of years, I've really helped on that front. And one of the big things that we started to do after I stepped in was, for every episode, the whole podcast is called How Leaders Lead.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an effort that David started after he retired from Yum Brands. So he loves leadership development. That's even one thing that he loved doing as CEO even. And so he wanted to keep learning himself, but then share that learning with other people. So in every episode, we started to define kind of what's the controlling idea? Like, what is the big lesson that you're going to learn from a Deion Sanders or from a Condoleezza Rice? And then we give you that in the first 60 to 90 seconds. Like, hey, here is the leadership lesson you're going to learn from Deion. Here's the interview. And then we kind of come back at the end and say, here's how you can put that into practice. And so I created that structure with him, kind of defining the controlling idea, giving people that action step. And we've been doing that now. We actually went back into the archives, re-recorded the intros and outros for the entire feed. So now every episode in the feed is that.
So next question was, so you do that after you just have the conversation. He has the conversation with whoever it is, Deion Sanders, whatever, and then you pull out that one lesson learned and then how to apply it after. I like that. That's clever.
When we interviewed Coach Prime, so that was 10 days after David's wife had passed away.
Wow.
And that kind of became a part of the conversation a little bit.
Sure.
It came up in the conversation, and then Coach is promoting a new book. And so the first chapter is, even if you're broken, keep moving. And that's what we ended up rolling with for the controlling idea for the episode. Even if you're broken, keep moving. And so it had been talked about a couple different times throughout the episode. And then we just were like, if there's a lesson, this is what David's been experiencing in his life right now. This is a, lesson that we want you to learn. Hey, you want to know what great leaders, if you want to, how do leaders lead? Yeah. Great leaders, even if they're broken, they keep moving. So that's the idea that we handed people.
That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty. That was my next question.
Yeah.
Was what was the lesson from Deion Sanders?
Yeah.
So
there is a theme, and that's one thing that I've experienced too. Is whether it's people like we've just talked about, or CEOs of these big companies. Usually they've been through this for enough years. They have a point of view. They are unique in their own leadership because they are uniquely wired. And so they then show up in a company and they are who they are. No. And so usually there is this element of, or a theme that will rise up. Like Alan Mulally, he led the turnaround at Ford, but he talks about like, to serve is to live. And so service is such a huge part of, how he shows up as a leader. And that kind of theme is what we ended up latching onto for his episode. And knowing in advance we write all the questions in advance. Yeah. So we know who we're going to talk to. Usually through the research, we've heard them share stories. So we'll if we anticipate a theme, we also can ask very intentional questions around it to try to see if that does rise to the surface. So we can manufacture not the right phrase, but we can kind of create
focus.
it. Yeah, focus. There you go. Yeah, we can create that focus in the conversation too by asking questions around it.
Unlike this podcast with no focus whatsoever. What is David's theme, would you say?
Yeah. David's theme is, so David grew Yum Brands from $4 billion to 32 in market cap. And the number one thing that he drove in the culture was recognition and valuing every person's contribution. So, that's one thing that David talks a lot about is if you want to make big things happen, you got to take people with you because you're never going to do it alone. And so that is very much his thing. It's like recognizing people, see that everybody counts, and kind of give them the dignity of showing up and letting them know that they matter.
And it seemed like it's worked out for him, I guess. I mean, even just the figure 1.5 million employees. You can't comprehend that.
No.
You know, that just goes to it's just like, yeah, that's a lot. Like, I don't even know how many a lot that is, but that's a lot.
Yeah. But so you hear that, right? Like David, he's this recognition guy.
Yeah.
But I've been working with him for almost 2 years now. And it's been really incredible to see how he does it. So even how he offers feedback is just elite.
How does he do it?
So he always says, here's what I appreciate about you. Here's how I think you can be even better.
Sure.
So for a lot of the interviews that we do, I'll take a stab at the first draft of questions. And then he comes along with his expertise, having done his own research, and will offer direction on maybe, let's start with this instead of this. Sometimes he'll completely strike questions. But let's just say that he wants to change a lot, which happens.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
What I always love is in almost every single instance, he'll say, some really great questions in here. And then he goes on to tell me all the things that we need to change. But just even hey, there's some really great questions in here. I know that I'm not mailing it in. I am doing the research, trying to ask the best questions that I can. And so for him to even just acknowledge the effort that I put in, it just makes me receptive to the feedback. And I'm not defensive about it because he recognizes the work that I did. And so even just here's something I appreciate about you. Here's how it can be even better. It's like, some really great questions in here, and then goes on with the specifics on how he wants to change it. Yeah. That is even just recognizing everyone's contribution, valuing that, and, giving me a shout out for the things that I did do well.
It doesn't call your questions stupid. These are stupid.
Not yet.
Well, if you're 100 something episodes in, you're fine. Yeah, that's a good enough.
He's always so positive about it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
and it makes me be like, great. Let me know what coaching or I want to know your feedback. How can we make this better?
It's interesting though with leadership. There are definitely common themes. I think that is without a doubt there are common themes, but at the same time, you have to develop your own style.
That's right.
Everybody has a different style.
Oh, yeah.
Like Steve Jobs, for example, going back to Apple, he wasn't saying, great questions. Nice work, everybody.
Oh, no.
He was saying, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. This is horrible. And he was known for just being brutal in his criticism. But at the same time, and while I don't know if that's the superior form of leadership, I don't think you can dispute that it didn't work for him. Like
Bob
worked.
Chapman and Steve Jobs are very different leaders.
Very different.
But one thing that I would have loved a lesson I would have loved to have learned earlier on in my career is knowing that fact. And the same is true of every leader has its own kind of, value theme.
Yeah.
So does every company, largely because of the culture that's established. So I wish I would have had even more of an awareness about that. But the important thing is for every single person is go find a company and or leader that you really resonate with.
Sure.
Somebody that aligns with your values, because maybe you are motivated by Steve Jobs and this is horrible. Let's push. He's trying to push people to do things they never imagined possible, right? Like maybe that is so motivating for you, but that might actually be a total morale killer for somebody else.
Yeah.
Where you need Bob Chapman, right? You just got to know how you're wired too, and then go spend time with a leader and or company that really helps kind of bring out the best in you.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a Bob Chapman guy. I was able to meet him originally 2 years ago. I think now I got to go to their headquarters.
St. Louis?
Yeah, in St. Louis. And it's nothing special. It's for what they do, for how valuable that business is and impactful that business is. It's pretty low key. And you walk in, we sit down at a conference table. He just talked for an hour. And I was just like a puppy dog, just sitting there like, this is so cool. Like he was just telling story after story after story. I'm like, this is awesome. Just soaking it up like a little sponge. And I walked out of there with a big smile on my face, and we've been able to do some other stuff with him after that. But yeah, his style, I'm a lot more in line with his style. And his book, Everybody Matters, is one of the 3 books I recommend everybody. If you got to read this book, because it makes so much sense.
It's the name of one of the conference rooms in your office.
Which is why, yes, because I read that book before I'd ever talked to the guy or whatever it is. And it just, again, for everybody, different things resonate. And I read that book. I'm like, again, like StoryBrand, this just makes sense. This makes sense. Like the way it's laid out. Yeah, this makes perfect sense. How could I say this is stupid? It's like, this is exactly what I've been thinking or what I've been wanting to say or learning. I just haven't had the words for it. And here they are, not just by a theorist, by a guy that basically says, hey, here's what I've done. He's not quiet about it. He's like, this is the results of our business. Speak for themselves. And it's like, he just has to put the results up there. You're like, yeah, check. Like, he knows what he's talking about. And then here's how I did it. By caring for people, by making everybody matter. And here's how I made everybody matter. It's like, oh, this is so cool.
And he had a pretty big transformation himself.
Yeah.
To even get to that space. So,
yeah.
But we did an interview with him in January. That episode hasn't aired yet, but I mean, I'm sure you can imagine what the theme of that episode's going to be.
I was going to say, I don't have to ask him about that one. Yeah. He wrote a book about it. So you just look at the title.
And that's what I was doing some research on another guest and was on the publisher's landing page and I saw that book. And I was doing research for Will Guidara's book.
Okay.
And Will owned 11 Madison Park, which became the #1 restaurant in the world. But they're all under the same imprint. And so then I saw that title of the book and I'm like, okay, I want to know more about that guy. And then here's a book called Everybody Matters. And he grew this business. It's like a $3-point-something billion business.
Yeah.
And just, I love that perspective on leadership. And those are the kinds of people that we want to platform. I want to give somebody like a Bob Chapman the microphone because I feel like what he does as a leader is a thing that a lot of people can mirror in their own leadership and be better for it. You know, and their business results speak for itself. So it's hard to argue that it doesn't work.
But this conversation's all over the place. It's so interwoven. Going back to the whole accountability thing too. I got on the phone with Bob this past summer, and it was the first week of a 5-week road trip across the United States to go visit probably 40 contractors.
Wow.
Living out of an RV. We did 15,000 miles. It was amazing. But the first week, I get on the phone with him. I'm in Texas, and I tell him what I'm doing, and I'm like, pretty gung-ho about it. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm driving around this and that. And he started to get into where we were in the business and, mixed results, this and that. He's like, so why are you driving around the United States for the next 5 weeks when that's going on in the business? I didn't have a good answer for him. And so I was, you go into that conversation like, this is awesome. I get to talk to Bob Chapman. This is amazing. And he's going to tell me how cool I am and how cool what we're doing is. And he said it in a very caring way. That's, I think, why it resonated. But it wasn't like, what the hell are you doing? It's like, so why are you doing that? And I got off the phone. I was like, damn.
Why am I doing this?
Damn it. Yes. Yeah. And looking back on it, like, I don't necessarily regret it because it was an extraordinary experience. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, he was right. That was not the best call at the moment. Absolutely not the best call. And I should have been paying attention to the more important things, but I wasn't. I think I was worn out by the important things. So I was like, let's play hooky for a while and get the heck out of here. But he, from a leadership standpoint, that accountability, even just asking that question, like, yeah.
And what I love about him, if he didn't care about you, he wouldn't have said it.
No.
But he was willing to say it out loud. And he's been so conditioned to, I feel like great leaders are like firefighters. They like run into the fire when everybody else is running away. And he's, from even just that example, what I would imagine is he's so used to doing that, just asking the question. He's not going to hide. He's just be like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And that is the putting it into practice for years and years and years. And because he's been doing that for years and years and years, he's a great leader because he's willing to ask the hard question when nobody else is going to,
Sure.
even to somebody who doesn't even know that well.
Yeah.
And that is a sign of a really great leader.
Or even I've recognized giving feedback promptly is what great leaders do.
Oh, yeah.
They don't wait to hey, and they might go about it in different ways and oftentimes in a tactful manner, but it's not delayed. They get right into it really quickly. If that's on their mind, they're just going to say it. They're not going to dance around, beat around the bush, or wait. They're just going to get right into it because they know they have to confront it at some point. So it's like, why waste the time? We're just going to get into it right now. And sometimes when talking to some of these people, it takes you aback a little bit because you're not expecting it. But then after the fact, you realize, like, I'm so appreciative that they just got into it with me. Like, this is so refreshing because most people do beat around the bush, and or most people just don't say anything ever. And so when you do get that feedback, you're like, oh, okay, all right, cool. That's what I needed.
I don't think that people have the time to think about it, meaning like they have to say it because if you're looking at just yesterday, I asked David, you're running a $1.5 million company. Help me understand the pressure. And he's like, I actually slept pretty well at night.
Yeah.
And I think that the only reason why that's possible, because David shares that same thing, he's going to just say it. He, I think, has also learned that to just sit with that information for a night, for 2 nights. He doesn't have time to sit with it for 1 or 2 nights.
Yeah.
And it's almost more life-giving to just say it, get everything out on the table.
Yeah.
I was in a meeting. We were sitting there with our entire team. We do an annual kickoff meeting. We bring everybody in. And he asked a really hard question in front of everybody. And I'm sitting there thinking, shouldn't we have done this like on the side with these couple of people and had that conversation over here? Nope. Come to find out, he knew he was going to say it. Like, he had the hard thing and he just was willing to let everybody be a part of the conversation. It's all out there because he doesn't have the time nor the desire to have all the side conversations.
Yeah.
So I actually think that's part of learned experience when you're interacting with that kind of level, acting at that level. It's amazing.
I watched, and I just learned that lesson from watching someone else recently. I just watched someone struggle with something for a while. They knew something had to happen. And it probably should have just been done, but it was sat on for weeks. And you could just see it just tear them apart.
Makes it worse.
Oh, man. It just so painful. And I think like there was good intent. They didn't want to go create a chaotic situation, this and that, but it came at a pretty substantial cost. And just watching that cost was, difficult from the outside, but it's like at the same time, you can't intervene because they have to learn that themselves. That's their lesson to learn. They're learning how to lead like I am, but even learning from others from a leadership standpoint in that, like from others' pain. While it's happening, not like, I learned this lesson a few years ago. It's like just watching it unfold in front of you. But from that outside perspective to you, it's so clear. And that was a good reminder as far as like, if something's eating at you, get it on the table as fast as you can, because it helps nobody by just holding that in and letting it eat at you. What did your book end up being about?
Yeah. So the book is called The Secret Society of Success. And when I was thinking about what my life had looked like up to writing that book, but there was a season of my life when I wanted to be the next John Mayer. I mean, I thought I was going to be a star. That was the dream.
Yeah. Who hasn't? Yeah.
And so I chased that for a while, and that was my first business venture. I'm in college. I'm trying to make a living doing that. And it didn't happen. And it's interesting. The world that we live in basically says to be successful, you have to be the person in the spotlight, be the star, be the one that everybody's talking about, climb the ladder, be the boss. But going from this dream of trying to be the next John Mayer to spending 10 years working with Don behind the scenes, the further and further I stepped away from the stage, the more and more fulfilled I felt in my work. So when you're living and operating in this world that says success is only this one thing, but then in my own life experiencing a very different reality, I felt very successful, even though I was kind of looking at success through a different lens for most people. I just started to think like maybe the way that we're thinking about success is a little wonky. Like how else can we think about it? And so then as I looked at all the people in my life who I'd been inspired by, you know, the Tim Cooks of the world, some people very much in the spotlight, I just started to realize that whether you're in the spotlight or whether you're not, the way that these people show up, I started to find some common denominators. And the common denominator in all of it is this idea of helping other people win, you know, like serving others. So every chapter in the book is kind of another take on success and some people who have shown me kind of new ways to think about it, whether it's from failure or from, you know, the scoreboard that we're measuring ourselves against, or, you know, the very idea of like, you know, success itself, like what is it? And so that's what the book ended up becoming, all really told through this journey where I'm just curating stories of people that have, you know, shaped the way that I've been thinking about it.
And I think that's probably more true than ever before with social media and the world that we live in today. Is you're just bombarded by this really one story that is success. Like, this is success. And you see all these people like out there, the glitz and the glam, and you're like, man, I've been sitting here working hard. Why don't I have that? Because you're chasing after that, and that's the definition in your head. You don't have it yet, but it's like, wait a minute. That's not the only way to do it. And even like, is that it? I don't know. I have no idea. And going back to human beings, just to define success as this one thing doesn't make any sense when it comes to humans, because every human's different. So it's like, how could success be one thing? In theory, success is unique to every individual. Success looks different to every single individual. And I think success is like one of my favorite quotes. I shared it the other day. It's a Maslow quote. What a man can be, he must be. Like, I think it really has to do with being on your path, being aligned with who you are, and being aligned with what you should be doing in this world, and the value you should be creating. Looks different for everybody. But I don't think, it's a shame because I don't think a lot of people are on that path. And it's hard for me to watch because I'm on that path, and it's awesome. It's terrible a lot of days, and it's not easy. And I'm sure you can relate, and anybody else can relate. But at the same time, I don't get home and question things. I'm like, I am doing what I should be doing. And for that feeling alone, I am so grateful for. So grateful for.
One of the more inspiring people for me has been a guy named Michael Collins. And a lot of people know of Apollo 11. You know, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Pretty
People
big
know
deal.
that,
Yeah.
right?
But did it happen?
Yeah.
No.
So they know Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, but most people had never heard of Michael Collins. And Michael was the guy who Ubers Neil and Buzz to the moon, right? So he takes them all the way there.
And doesn't go.
Drops them off.
Yeah.
Those guys then do all the things they have to do on the moon's surface. He then stays in the command module, orbits the moon 26 times until those guys are ready to be picked up and brought back to Earth. But what I love is when Michael Collins gets back, they sit down with the press. He talks about how content he was to have had one of those 3 seats. And I think that the world that we live in, it's almost like everybody's saying you have to be Neil or a Buzz. But what I love is, like, do you have to actually walk on the moon to be happy? And Michael Collins shows us kind of a different path, which is also why I love the dirt world so much. Because while we live in this world that says you got to walk on the moon. If you really want your life to matter, go walk on the moon. And I think there's a whole industry of people that say, I can find contentment knowing that the road we just built helped 100,000 people get home today.
Yeah.
And it's when we can find resonance and validation with the fact that if we just play our part, that's what we're here to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, know your role. That's not to say to not have ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Like Michael Collins was one of 3 people chosen to walk on the moon.
Yeah, you don't
right?
get to that
so
position.
I'm not trying to say don't have ambitions. That's not it. But what I am saying is, if you can look at what you do in service of other people, helping other people win, to me, whatever anyone else would tell you about how successful you are, the way that you feel when you go home at night is all that will really matter. I mean, you even just said it, like how you feel at night, you know what you were here to do. But if you looked at your success as how many social media followers or whatever, it's like, there's people that have got a lot more than you. Mm-hmm. So are you just going to be perpetually frustrated or, discontent because it's not X, Y, and Z? I just think that that's a pretty rough way to live.
Now it's the other way, honestly, because I'll look at some people that I think are a pretty big deal, and I'll like, they have less followers than I do. I'm like, why is that the case? They're a much bigger deal than I am. I've been noticing that recently. It's like, and I chuckle to myself, like, that's hilarious because they're a way bigger deal. I look at that too when it comes to the dirt world. I grew up in country clubs and in what most people view as the most successful part of society. But now I've become more acquainted with the dirt world. And if you gave me really nice country club in Aspen or landfill, those are my 2 options. I'm choosing landfill 10 out of 10 times. 10 out of 10 times. I think landfills are so much cooler than a country club. Way cooler. Way better.
Why?
Because it's just, I feel like it's just more who I am. And I just find it more interesting and fascinating. And I find the people at a landfill more interesting and fascinating than I do the people at the country club. And I think, a lot of people would say the country club is probably a lot more fascinating to them. Cool. Yeah, that's for you. Awesome. But to me, it's like, it's just a different way of looking at success and being around the people you want to be. Like, you think it's just this one thing, but to me, it's proven, no, it's actually the complete opposite. And I'm just going to go as far in this direction as I can because I know that's not for me. But I see a lot of people chasing the country club, not questioning the other stuff out there. Maybe the country club's not for you. Maybe that isn't your form of success. If it is, cool, chase it. But I think a lot of people get there and then realize, like, wait a minute, this actually isn't for me. I'm more of a landfill kind of guy. So if you are a landfill kind of guy, I know a lot of landfills hiring.
I think if everybody were to answer the question, fill in this blank, success is, most people don't take the time to define that for themselves. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, subconsciously, they live according to other people's definitions.
Which is such a shame.
And so the work for all of us to do is, you could call it finding your why, you could call it a lot of things, but I think to define what is success. And I've had to ask myself that question even as I've released this book and have kind of launched into like a totally different life and career. I know a lot of, quote, successful authors, and I know one person, they did 200 speaking events last year. And if I were to try to measure my success against theirs, I would be miserable because me doing 200 speaking events would not work for me and my family. But for this person, they're in a great spot. Mm-hmm. So the important thing is, what is success for you? And then live that.
I think people get discouraged though, because they just expect it to like come along and slap them in the face one day. And that's not how it works. Mm-hmm. I think you just have to keep moving. I think it takes a lot of work to actually figure that out and to get that answer, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people, they don't have that answer because they, in a lot of ways, haven't put in the work to find it, or don't have the life experience for it. Because I also think it takes a certain amount of life experience. And some people find it sooner than others. But, you can go 40 years, you can go 50 years. And then I've seen plenty of people finally find it 50, 60 years in, 70 years in sometimes. I think it takes work to even find an original answer to that question. And then to your point, it's subject to change and will likely change, I think, as you go through your life, which is also, I think, a good thing. I think it should change. That means you are like, cool, you did get to that point. Now what's next? Like those guys, like success to them was being an astronaut. Yeah, that's pretty far up there. But then there's been a lot of research on astronauts coming back to Earth and becoming wildly depressed because it's like, well, once you hit that bar, there's not a whole lot beyond that. So how do you make more beyond that?
It's true for me. I mean, I wanted to be the next John Mayer, failed. I mean, I was crushed. The moment that I took all this inventory that I had in my garage and just finally accepted that dream was not going to happen, and I put all that stuff in the trash, like that was not an easy moment. No. But our failures have an opportunity. Our failures give us an opportunity to pivot. And I ended up going from that into kind of stumbling my way into tour management, where I'm on the road working with musicians, but helping on the business and logistics side. And then I stepped into artist management. And then I jumped into Apple while my wife was in grad school, just some consistency and income. Sure. And then got some incredible experiences at Apple, kind of dipped back into artist management again, started working with Dawn. So it's been this wild journey over the last 10 years, 15 years, thinking that I wanted to do this one thing. And then when that didn't work out, I kind of had to suffer through like, well, what now? Yeah. And so now I'm doing work that I really love. And I feel like I've kind of found my path. But I also had a lot of years where I'm not feeling like I'm in it, not living that dream out. And so it's a great position to be in, to be able to say like, I'm doing work that I love. But I also realize that there's so many people out there who cannot say that. And I just feel like there is the journey for all of us. So it's, one thing that I have been so impressed with, even in just hearing you talk through this conversation, is you're trying to learn from every situation. And I think that there is no better gift for us to give ourselves, but to have that self-awareness, that antenna up to be like, what am I learning? So when you're in that season, when you're doing something maybe that doesn't bring you joy, what's going on your one page that day as you write down, right? Like hopefully that can be the journey getting you to a position, to a company, working alongside a leader that can get you closer to, feeling like you're living in a life that you're really, grateful for. And, but it definitely can be some work.
Sure. Oh, it definitely will be some work.
It will be some work. Yeah.
That's all I know. Well, what's the book once again?
The Secret Society of Success.
And then the podcast that you're helping out with.
How Leaders Lead.
How Leaders Lead. All right. Well, thanks for coming by a second time.
Absolutely.
And I don't expect it to be a third. Well, maybe like a year or two. Maybe we'll catch up then, but hopefully that's a different ball game. And then we'll see you at the summit.
That's right.
In November.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.